we just see familiar situations, interactions that we've seen 1,000 times before in so many pieces of media, whether it be films or TV shows, but like the way those perform were much better because this thing is just so focused on the gimmick. But like Zemeckis, like even though we've seen all these interactions before 1,000 times over, Zemeckis is going, yeah, but it's all being shown in a single spot and shot. And I'm like, that doesn't make it better. That doesn't make it good or innovative. You're just telling dull, insipid stories that we've seen time and time again in the most boring way possible. Let's go ahead and move on to my review for Here. Yes, Here. So I know I'm fairly late with this particular review for Robert Zemeckis. Good old Bobby's completely unenthused and turned off by the marketing of this movie. Just every bit of information and news story, description, and trailer that they showed for this movie just looked repulsive. Repulsive in the kind of way that when you bite into something so sweet, right? So artificially flavored, so artificially saccharine that it just makes you gag. It's like, oh, it's way too sweet. How much sugar did you put in this thing, right? That's what the film just looked like, with a gross AI, CGI, and not rendered well glaze, a non-rendered glaze of CGI layered on top of that sugar mound. That's what Here looked like. The idea of the film, which, yes, it reunites Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, who were previously in Bobby's Forrest Gump, along with a bunch of other actors like Paul Bettany and Kelly Riley, who play various people in stories and events that, all occur on a single spot of land. Stories that span from the distant past, 65 million years ago when dinosaurs walked the earth, all the way to contemporary times, right? A single shot that has the screen often divided into panels, presenting some of these events simultaneously or transitioning into them, basically. A story of countless generations told in a non-linear fashion, right? It's an adaptation of a 6-page comic story from the 80s that I guess later morphed into like a 300-page graphic novel released in the 2010s. I have not read the original short comic or the original graphic novel. I just learned about it, I guess, recently when the movie released its first trailer. But apparently it's well-liked. So fair enough. I can't speak to it. I haven't read it, so I simply don't know. I can only talk about the film itself. But I do want to just kind of briefly talk about Robert Zemeckis as a filmmaker and just, what he's kind of become, I think, produced over the years. I think when you think of Robert Zemeckis, a few things come to mind immediately. A lot of good stuff. Some good stuff, I think, initially. Like films like Back to the Future. I mean, the Back to the Future trilogy, right? Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is my personal favorite film of his. One of my favorite movies of all time. Probably in my top 10. Death Becomes Her, which I have renewed appreciation for. We did a watch party for that not too long ago. That movie was great. It's kind of him doing his own Tim Burton story, and I think pretty well. And then stuff like Castaway, which was a really good survival story. And I think probably his best film in a while came out like 10 years ago, like a decade ago, and that was Flight with Denzel Washington. But I think after his era in the 80s where he really found himself and was, got these big projects, and then in the 90s, and of course, had the success of Forrest Gump. It's I like Forrest Gump. It's a little too saccharine. It gets a little kind of ridiculous and goofy to me, but a lot of people love that film. And then he got into the 2000s. That's when, and he was still producing Castaway I thought was great. What Lies Beneath I thought was really good. That's a kind of an underrated film of his. But that's when he got into just this, I think a lot of filmmakers like him, like Steven Spielberg or certainly like George Lucas, they just become more obsessed with the technology of filmmaking and less so when it comes to the stories and the writing and the characters. Like, that all to them feels like secondary or tertiary, or in some case they could give a shit less about that. They just become obsessed with the technology of it. And, you know, Zemeckis entered his weird animation era, his dead-eyed animation era, chat, with things like the Polar Express and like Christmas Carol, and he produced a lot of these dead-eyed animated movies like, you know, Mars Needs Moms. Like, the best of those I thought was Beowulf, but again, some of the animation is obviously very dated, and just the way the characters look, it was always very off-putting, right? And then he did a bunch of movies that were kind of forgettable up until Flight. And then, like, just the last couple of years, he's just been making, writing, producing, directing just garbage. A lot of garbage. And just the last stinky turd that he plopped out was Pinocchio, which, you know, I forget what year that was. That 2020? I think that was 2022. I know we got a lot of Pinocchio movies. We got I think that 1 year alone, we had the excellent Guillermo del Toro animated Pinocchio movie, which I really enjoyed, the stop motion film. That was great. I think that won the Academy Award that year, Best Animated Film. Wonderful movie. Then you had the Pauly Shore Pinocchio, which everyone made fun of, like that direct-to-DVD one. And then I think the worst of them, honestly, is Zemeckis' live-action Pinocchio remake, where he had fucking poor Tom Hanks running around with a boppity-boopy Italian accent. And just literally had Pinocchio squat down, smelling just a huge pile of shit. It was like, what's going? Awful film, just a really terrible movie. And just it's like, Zemeckis is one of those filmmakers who I just feel like has fallen off, or like he had maybe like one last hurrah with Flight, but then after that it was just like, no, thank you, I'm good. His last films have just been really disappointing, and I think in a lot of cases really, really awful. And I just feel like he continues his downward spiral as a filmmaker with Here, a movie that the trailer sold as a broad, saccharine gimmick with the depth of a nearly dried up puddle of water. I mean, this movie is bad, guys. Bad in the kind of way that it's so obsessed with its sole gimmick, the single shot from that one specific spot, that it just neglects everything else in terms of the stories, the characters, the special effects, and the digital effects. Like, you have all these stories being told across time from this single spot. Like, the movie literally starts at least 65 millions of years ago, when dinosaurs are roaming the Earth. And then you see the asteroid hit, which doesn't make any sense, though. Is like, because didn't, like, the main asteroid that hit in Mexico, if I recall, the area that, you know, would later become Mexico, and the Yucatan Peninsula, right? And then we're seeing this giant thing like hit this place that's nowhere near Mexico. It's like, what are we doing? But in any case, then much later on, we follow this Native American tribe, these two Native Americans and their story, you know, the courtship between them, and then their family, her giving birth, and then eventually, you know, the death of them all. And then we then go to the illegitimate son of Benjamin Franklin, William Franklin, who was a fucking traitor, who was a loyalist to the British Empire at the time, and literally fought against the 20th century. And we're following this couple, and this one guy loves the aeroplane. That's going to be the way to travel in the future, honey. And then he gets the Spanish flu, and it's like, okay. And then later on, we're like in the 40s or whatever. We're following this couple. She's like a model. He's like this, he's this inventor. He creates the recliner, the lazy boy, right? And then we're primarily focusing on the Young family, which are initially following Paul Bettany, who is a GI, you know, uses the GI Bill basically to purchase this house in 1945. after, World War II ends. And then the Youngs raise these kids, and then the main, kid is played by Tom Hanks, who has just CGI fucking goop all over his body. You basically have a 70-year-old man who's running around. I mean, you have a guy who is actually a 70-year-old person running around like he's supposed to be 20, but he looks anything but that. He reminded me of the scene from The Irishman where fucking Bobby De Niro is supposed to be like 35 and trying to beat up a guy, but it looks like an 80-year-old man trying to beat up a guy. It doesn't look good, right? It's the same circumstances here. And then we can even go into modern days where we're following this, this couple, and they have to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm like, oh, it came back, right? And here's the thing. Like, all these stories are dull. Like, not one of them is interesting or compelling. The acting across the board is very stagey and broad, almost as if like Zemeckis wanted the actors to overcompensate because they could only operate it from a single like location, even though you absolutely can tell a compelling story in a single place, even within a single shot. But I think Zemeckis's his obsession with the gimmick is what inevitably does a disservice to everything else. None of these stories are compelling or interesting. All the characters are played so broadly and like, yeah, look at this house, honey. Look at this window. Can you believe the window here? My God, I'm pulling on my invisible suspenders. Like, what are we doing? It's like it's played so broadly, like a poor man's theater group, like a theater troupe or something, and they have just so little depth that I just found myself not liking or being interested in any of them. You just don't care. Like, when one of them fucking dies, it's like, okay, good, then we don't have to follow that story anymore. We can get rid of that. We're whittling down all these stories. We just see familiar situations, interactions that we've seen 1,000 times before in so many pieces of media, whether it be films or TV shows. But like the way those perform were much better because this thing is just so focused on the gimmick. But like Zemeckis, like, even though we've seen all these interactions before 1,000 times over, Zemeckis is going, yeah, but it's all being shown in a single spot and shot. And I'm like, that doesn't make it better. That doesn't make it good or innovative. You're just telling dull, insipid stories that we've seen time and time again in the most boring way possible. And the scenes where they have like young Tom Hanks and young Robin Wright, and everyone's like making a big, it's like, oh, not, I should say everyone's making a big deal about this, because I don't think hardly anyone's making a big deal. Like, oh, it's the return of fucking, Forrest and Jenny from Forrest Gump, and it's like, I don't really care. That's not really important to me. That's 30 years later, and here they are again. Or isn't that cool? It's like, no, because you didn't write anything interesting for them to do, and you're having them act like characters that are obviously supposed to be much younger. They're supposed to be fucking teenagers, and it's like, I don't know, a goddamn 18-year-old that's waddling around like a 70-year-old man. It just doesn't work. It doesn't look good, and the CGI, whatever they have on their faces, is like, something's wrong here. Something is wrong, and I don't know why. Like, Zemeckis, it's so funny. Like, the other filmmaker I would compare him to in a way is James Cameron, because James Cameron is that kind of guy that he's obsessed with the technical aspects of filmmaking, and the one thing he has over Zemeckis, like, even though I've criticized the Avatar movies, they all look fucking beautiful. Like, they all look great. The blue kitty cats, they look great. Like, all the mech suits and shit that the humans use, they all look amazing. Like, okay, I think he's a little too obsessed with technology, and I wish he would concentrate more on telling compelling stories of compelling characters. But the thing that he is obsessed with does look good. But in Zemeckis' case, the technology he's obsessed with and the way in which he shows it, like the effects, they look like shit. They look really bad. So you're left with kind of nothing from this movie. You're just even though this movie is trying to make you emotional, it tries so fucking hard to do that. It just fails. you completely reject it, and you're just like, can we just wrap this shit up? This is like a short film that has been extended out. Not even a very good short film. Again, a very, again, gimmicky, kind of dull short film. But it's like, at least it was only 10 minutes long, But this one is like extended out to an hour and a half. I'm like, it doesn't need to be, because again, none of these stories are compelling enough to have it be that length. It's just, it's a complete disappointing. There's just nothing remarkable about this movie at all. And the whole idea that it's all told from a single location. It's like, it's not really visually interesting at all. It's like, you changed the fucking house. Now it looks like it's from the 1940s, and now it looks like here it is in the 2000s. I'm like, so it doesn't matter if what occupies the shot is dull, insipid, and boring. Who gives a shit? So Bobby Zemeckis. Ooh, I can see why so many were interested in this movie, and why so many studios didn't really want to distribute this. They're like, nah, we're good. we don't really need this. It's a bad movie, chat. Yeah, which is, again, Zemeckis continuing his, I think, downward spiral film. Like it's okay for these guys to retire. All right, it's okay to say, like, you know what, I just don't have it in me anymore to do it. If that's the case, then do it, or produce something that you have passion for. I guess just don't. But him as a writer, him as a filmmaker, as a director. I think it's over. I think it's over. And here, I think, is the perfect showcase of that. How far he has fallen off as a director. So, very disappointing movie, Chad. I do not suggest here. There's plenty of other films that are told in a nonlinear fashion that are infinitely more interesting than this movie. But what about you guys? What do you think of Bobby Zemeckis' here? Maybe you liked it. Maybe you liked it a lot more. Were you more mixed on? Maybe like you saw some good, where you saw some bad, or were you like me, where you're just like, there's nothing special about this film. This movie is just the gimmick, and the gimmick is undercutting every single aspect of this movie, making it just bleh. But what about you guys? Let me know. What about you, chap?
5 minutes later.
Oh, let's see. You think the Zemeckis Pinocchio is worse than the Pauly Shore one? Well, that's a bold. I don't think it's a bold statement at all. I think you can. You know why? Because there's more to laugh at the Pauly Shore Pinocchio movie. I think there's plenty of that's unintentionally funny. There is just nothing there might be a scene or two that's unintentionally funny about the Disney Pinocchio, but it's just a horrible, wretched movie. Like, you can at least laugh at the Pauly Shore one, but the Disney one, I don't think you can. So Flintstone's house. I wish they had a Flintstones house. That would have been really good. And those stories are given enough time for you to potentially get invested. Yep, that's true. That's true. It makes you feel more distant. Yep, 100%. It makes you feel like a ghost. I feel like a ghost was watching these boring fucking people. Now, if they were being haunted, then maybe you got something there. Maybe it's like this ghost just fucking haunts these people. That would have been kind of, that was like, all right, just fucking with them throughout all these decades. And that would have been kind of cool for a horror film. But Zemeckis is more like, fuck it. Yeah, he really is. Cameron is definitely more of a perfectionist. Johnny, we're making another movie, Johnny. We can very easily point to movies that did this better, like Alfred Hitchcock's Rope or Rear Window. Yeah, oh my God, yes. Or the episode of BoJack Horseman that just gives him a eulogy in one static shot. Yeah. Chris Ayres and Cameron make sure to put an emphasis on making the worlds of his movies feel tactile, like you're in a real place and looking at real creatures. With much of the Zemeckis stuff looks so glossy. Yeah, and overly shiny and plastic. Yeah, plasticky. It just looks artificial. You just look at this, it's like, none of this feels real. Feels like you're watching a cartoon. Yeah, like a cartoon made for the stage. I think Cloud Atlas might be a good comparison. Oh, I hated Cloud Atlas. That's another one I don't like. You see the thing today about Ridley Scott talking shit about Tarantino wanting to retire after only 10 movies? I did not. Although, I mean, listen, there's a lot I agree with Tarantino about some stuff. I disagree with him about some stuff, but and even though I may not love every single Tarantino movie, I do really appreciate that he puts a lot of time and thought into each project that he does. And what also separates him, I think, from Ridley Scott, because they're very different types of filmmakers, very different. Where Quentin Tarantino, he is very much a writer-director, right? That's what he is, and he takes his time with all of his projects, whether you like him or not. Well, Ridley Scott, I don't think he fucking cares about the scripts a lot of the cases, so that's why he's been able to do so much over all these years. He just jumps from project to project. So I don't know exactly what Ridley Scott has said, but I mean, if Tarantino, I don't think Tarantino's going to retire. Tarantino's going to retire from movies. I think he's going to do TV shows. He's going to do stage stuff, and he'll probably get that itch again. So, but he's going to keep making things, and maybe he just won't make another movie for a very long time or ever. But he's still going to make a lot of projects. I would be shocked if he's like, I'm never going to do anything else ever again. I'm like, I don't know about that. But I didn't hear what he said. Chris didn't even hate it. I mostly just thought it was flat. There's a few scenes towards the end with Hanks and Wright where they don't have the weird DA jump. Yeah, and I think work more because it's just two good actors in a room together without the previous distractions. But they're not at all. Here's the quote. I don't fucking believe that bullshit. Shut up and go make another movie. Quentin wrote a few things for my brother. They got along great. I'm not sure I've met him. I think he said it in that way. Yeah, I don't believe it either. I think he's still, even if he's not going to make another movie for a while, he's still going to be writing forever. He's going to write books. He's going to write, TV shows and stuff, his own series. I bet he'll get like a big fucking deal. If I was Warner Brothers, if I was David Zumbafu right now, as Tarantino saying all that, I would fucking court the hell out of him. I would court the hell out of him to do you want to do like a multiple limited series or something for HBO? I bet Tarantino would agree to that. I'm sure he would. And honestly, I think Tarantino should probably write television because I think one of the issues with some of his movies is that they feel too long. And he clearly needs more time to tell these stories. And so I think that would be better, personally. Tarantino's written and produced so much outside the movies. Yeah, exactly. He's directed, so he doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't. So he doesn't just have 10 movies. True. Let's see here. Speaking of Tarantino, he recently said he refused to watch the Dune remakes. Right. Which is so funny, which is ironic, because so many of his movies are remakes of other things. Either remakes or ripoffs of other movies that he's seen. So that's kind of rich having him say that. It's like, dude, come on. He can say whatever he wants, but it's like, people are going to call you out on that because so much of your stuff is obviously heavily influenced by... Inglourious Basterds is pretty much a remake of an older film called Inglourious Basterds, and just all the stuff that he references in that movie. Django Unchained is obviously a spiritual successor to the original Django films back in the day. He has the original Django in Django Unchained, so it's like, what are you talking about? Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Kill Bill, it's like, Tarantino, you're saying like, yep, those Kill Bill's completely original movies, right? He has fucking the bride. He has, her name, Kiddo, which, hey, I always hated her name, Beatrix Kiddo, wearing Bruce Lee's outfit, right? His iconic yellow and black stripe outfit. You're like, oh yeah, I don't do remakes. Like, I'd be like, dude, come on now. He's all talking about putting out so many movies in a short time. Where I wouldn't be doing it. Directing felt like work. It's my passion, therefore my pleasure. The actually keeps me going. I've damaged myself with too much tennis. I got dodgy knees, and I'm now getting injections in them. Can't be the old guy staggering around to get the set because when we're doing Glare 2, we're at 112 degrees, and I have to be out there. But I think that's also hurt Ridley Scott. At the same time. Him criticizing Tarantino. Yes, Ridley Scott has made considerably more movies than Tarantino, but the quality of them is wildly inconsistent. It's like, yes, for every gladiator, he makes a Prometheus, right? For every alien, he makes an Alien Covenant. God. For every Thelma and Louise, he makes an Exodus Gods and Kings, so. He's like a rapper sampling songs. Yeah, he samples a lot, yeah. Zumbafu. That's what I call him, Zumbafu. He's because I always make fun of his last name. Oh, Lord. The whole article is pretty fast from Hollywood. He'll always come back with a last duel. I don't know. We'll see if this movie. I'm very curious. I'm very, very curious. We'll find out. But yeah, my review over here, chat. I didn't like it. I think it sucks. I think Zemeckis should retire from filmmaking. He doesn't have it in him anymore. He shot as a director. And I don't know, just stop doing this gimmick shit, okay? It's clearly not working. The thing that you're obsessed with, you're not even good at. which is very funny. Oh, Christ. But there you go, Chad, here. I would not suggest seeing here. Not at all. But if you want to make up your own mind, you want to see it for yourselves, please go ahead and do so. Obviously, I'm not going to discourage you. I'm just saying that I think your time and money is better spent elsewhere, other than with here.